The Radio Collection presents two new titles. Jeanette Winterson's Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, read by Charlotte Coleman.
My father liked to watch the wrestling. My mother liked to wrestle.
Hannah Gordon reads The Ginger Tree.
I was very angry. I am 20 years old, if only just, and can look after myself.
Two new titles in the BBC Radio Collection.
Well, now on BBC Two with his weather view, here's Michael Fish.
Good evening to you. I think it's all changed on the weather front. In the next few days, a good deal of fine, warm weather in the east, whereas the west has some outbreaks of rain. And we are looking now to the west, or rather the southwest, for most of our weather. We're having frontal systems such as these coming along, bringing with them bands of cloud and rain. In fact, by the middle of tomorrow, I've simplified things, and by that time, that frontal system will be moving its way up across the centre of the country, although grinding to a halt all the while. Now we can see the way things have been on the satellite picture early on this morning. That was the troublesome cloud now out over the North Sea, and quite a bright, reasonably sunny start for many eastern parts. But there was this bank of cloud down to the southwest, and as you can see, that's been heading steadily northeastwards during the course of the day. And not only that, some of the cloud quite thick, bringing with it some fairly heavy bursts of rain. The best way to look at the rain is the radar, and again early on this morning just a scattering of light rain, but as I run that sequence you can see that as that rain moved away northeastwards, so some really heavy bursts came into the far southwest, and there have even been some thunderstorms mixed in with that as well. And on the computer, that continues to head northeastwards overnight tonight through tomorrow, grinding to a halt across Scotland there, and some further showery bursts of rain coming through from time to time right the way through those western areas, whereas eastern parts show every sign of drying up, and eventually tomorrow brightening up as well. But we'll get on to that in a minute. As far as tonight goes, for Northern Ireland and much of England and Wales, a good deal of cloud with those outbreaks of rain. The rain heaviest and most persistent in those western parts. I don't think all that much in the east, although there has been a thunderstorm recently uncomfortably close to the extreme southeast, and that'll be moving on into the continent, into the southern North Sea later on in the night, at the same time as the rain begins to work its way into the southwestern corner of Scotland. Quite a mild night everywhere, 8 degrees 46 Fahrenheit. Temperature last night in Scotland actually fell below freezing. And then tomorrow, well, I think for many parts starting off cloudy, again with some outbreaks of rain here and there, the heaviest rain in those western parts. But during the course of the day, for many central and eastern areas of England, the rain easing off, dying away, the weather brightening up, some sunshine coming along, maybe just here and there the odd shower. As for western parts of England, Wales and through Northern Ireland, a good deal of cloud, and again those showery bursts of rain, but there too, as the day goes on, brightening up. So in between any outbreaks of rain you could well have some dry and reasonably bright weather, but not so for much of Scotland. A good deal of cloud there, from rain on and off really for much of the day, although the rain not reaching the far north of Scotland, where it'll just stay dry and fairly cloudy. Temperature-wise, rather a cool day in those wetter parts of Scotland there, but quite warm by the afternoon in the brighter areas in the southeast there, as high as 20 degrees or 68 Fahrenheit. Now on Wednesday we're still going to have that frontal system with us, but all the while creeping northwards, weakening at the same time. Area of high pressure coming back to the southeastern corner of the country, so I think there on Wednesday maybe the odd shower, but really, generally speaking, turning out to be quite warm. Dry too, with some sunshine, but still these showers running around in those western parts, and still some more persistent rain in the far north of Scotland. Let's briefly recap for you on tomorrow. The brightest of the weather eventually ending up in southeastern parts, where it'll be a warm afternoon with some sunshine after the early rain. In these western areas, some rain from time to time, but even there brightening up, but not so over Scotland. Rather a grey day there, with that rain continuing on and off. Well, that's all for now. A very good night to you.
But there is a sparkling Sydney Sheldon comedy beginning evening tomorrow on 2. Cary Grant is the bachelor knight, Shirley Temple, the young girl with a crush on him, and Myrna Loy, the judge who sentences them to an evening together at 6. Bilko is next on parade at 7:35, to be followed at 8 by a new series of Open Space, this week made and given by pensioners' rights concern who make their case for a wage for retirement. Next, it's Top Gear, as William Woolard reports from the Veteran Car Club's Diamond Jubilee Rally. There are some new cars to be assessed and a multi-million-pound fraud investigated. The second episode of the new comedy series Tygo Road is at 9. And another new series, Present Imperfect, begins at 9:30. These 10 films examine the minutiae of life for a selection of people most affected by a changing Britain. The first follows an alcoholic and the family who stand by him. Present Imperfect at 9:30. Newsnight is at 10:30, and in the late show at 11:15, a special, a classical jukebox jury, in which 6 recordings of Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 are judged a hit or a miss. That's Tuesday on 2.
So, I'm a manager. Now what do I do?
I'm really out of my depth.
If it's practical, is it respected?
Go on a course?
Anyway, could I afford it?
What's the first step then?
To get a prospectus, ring 0908 655 182.
And now for this evening's transmission for the Open University. In the first of a pair of programmes introducing students to philosophy, the celebrated English philosopher Bernard Williams investigates the problems of utilitarianism.
The first part of the introduction to philosophy in A102 is on utilitarianism. In the early 19th century, utilitarianism became a controversial philosophy. But in spite of its difficulties, it's become, and perhaps remains, a highly influential way of thinking about moral questions. Today, it has its critics and its defenders. And one of its leading critics is Professor Bernard Williams, Provost of King's College, Cambridge. We're very grateful to Bernard Williams for agreeing to come and give us his views on utilitarianism.
The people who formulated utilitarianism in the 19th century, who Stuart referred to, such as Jeremy Bentham, put the doctrine in a very simple form that the criterion of what we ought to do is simply that which produces the greatest happiness of the greatest number. Now, this philosophy has had, I think, a checkered history since then. In some ways, it's now even more popular than it was in the Victorian era. I suppose because of the decline of religious belief, for one thing, and the departure of certain old received standards. It satisfies the search for a kind of rational basis of morality which people can understand and, as they hope, apply. But at the same time, though it has that kind of wind behind it, it's also, I think, met with a lot of distrust. Now, some of that distrust is due to the fact that, in a way, it isn't really put into practice. When people say they're putting it into practice, of course, and say they're appealing to the greatest happiness of the greatest number, that often isn't what they're doing. They're often simply putting in a system which appeals to the greatest happiness of a rather few number of people, namely the ones who are running society or doing well out of it. And I think that was some of the criticism, for instance, that Dickens was making through the character of Gradgrind. But I think a lot of the worries about it are that even if you did put it into practice, it'd be a pretty alarming system. That the idea of having society run in this efficient way to produce the greatest happiness of the greatest number might in fact lead to a kind of oppression or paternalism. There is something to be worried about here. People are disquieted about the utilitarian approach, yet at the same time, I think a lot of people feel that it's somehow the only rational way that we can have of grounding public morality, perhaps even our private moral sentiments in the modern world. And as I say,